In 2017, European football came to a standstill. It wasn't just a Champions League final, it was two teams with a chance to rewrite history. Real Madrid was on the verge. At the time, no team had won the competition back-to-back. Zinedine Zidane and Los Blancos were one win away from changing that. But standing in their way was an old lady looking to finally break a 21-year duck. Massimiliano Allegri's Juventus. After so many Champions League final defeats, they were at this stage again. History was on their side too, and so on that night in Cardiff, the entire world was tuned in. Something had to give. But to really understand just how big this final was, we've got to go back to how it all started for both teams. For Real Madrid, the Champions League group stage team that year was pretty much the same. Still Zinedine Zidane as the head coach. The majority of the players stayed. The headline additions to the team were Alvaro Morata's return from Juventus for €30 million and Marco Asensio's loan spell to Espanyol ending. Zidane didn't change much, and that's because it made sense not to change anything. See, Real Madrid had won the Champions League the season before. They entered the 2016-17 campaign as the defending champions. Zidane knew all the team needed was a few tweaks to keep it fresh, not change the core, but for Juventus on the other hand, it was a revolution. Massimiliano Allegri had a huge job on his hands to rebuild the old lady again. See guys, in that summer they had big players leave, and it didn't get any bigger than Paul Pogba's record-breaking move to Man United.
I'm back.
€110 million plus add-ons. It made Pogba the most expensive player in the world at the time. Add this to Alvaro Morata, the other half of Allegri's infamous strike duo with Tevez, going back to Real Madrid after Los Blancos activated his €30 million buyback clause. Big departures, but at the same time, they made statement signings in the window that summer. They signed Gonzalo Higuain, fresh off a 36-goal campaign with Napoli in the previous season, to set the record for the most goals in a single Serie A season. Juve broke the bank to sign Higuain. They paid €90 million. Allegri was making a statement. Morata gone? They added proven firepower in Serie A, and the signings didn't stop there. Miralem Pjanic from AS Roma for €32 million. Exciting wonder kid Marco Piazza from Dinamo Zagreb for €23 million. Mehdi Benatia from Bayern Munich. Dani Alves signing on a free transfer from Barcelona. Antoine Cuadrado making his loan deal the season before permanent for Juventus. Suddenly, this Juve team wasn't just stacked, they had experienced pros at the peak of their careers, and so now we know what both teams look like heading into the start of that season's Champions League. It's time to look at how they actually performed in the group stages. For Real Madrid, it wasn't smooth. Match day 1 almost started with a blip. They played Sporting Lisbon at home, and despite having more attempts and keeping the ball more, they struggled to break Sporting down until the 89th minute, when you know who came to the team's rescue. Ronaldo scored, and just 5 minutes later, the new kid was off the mark. Morata back at Real Madrid for a second spell. Instant impact. There were questions about the win, but still it was 3 points in the end for Real. On match day 2, they were up against a Dortmund team that had put 6 past Legia Warsaw, and once again Real looked unconvincing. Ronaldo and Varane scored either side of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's goal, but just when it seemed like Madrid would be able to hold on for the win in Germany, Andre Schürrle bagged to steal a point for Dortmund. Madrid followed this up with a 5-1 win against Legia Warsaw to lift the morale of the team, but by match day 4 they were away to Warsaw in Poland and somehow drew 3-3. They'd win again away at Sporting, but after drawing to Dortmund in a repeat 2-2 draw at the Bernabeu this time, Real Madrid with 12 points, 3 wins and 3 draws. 2 points behind table-topping Dortmund, and at the time, this was going to be a bad thing. Just before we get into why it was going to be a bad thing though, be sure to hit that subscribe button to Football Historia if you haven't yet, for more videos like this. This was still the old Champions League format, meaning the team that finished second place in the group always had a tougher draw than the table-topping teams. Still, they'd made it out of the group even though there were question marks about the performance. Juventus on the other hand? Allegri's team was near perfect. They had a tricky group. Sevilla, Lyon, Dinamo Zagreb. They were favourites to qualify, but even with that they still had to put up a performance, and they did. After a goalless draw with Sevilla on the opening day, 3 of the new signings in Higuain, Pjanic and Dani Alves all got on the score sheet in the 4-0 win at Dinamo Zagreb. They followed this up with a win away to Lyon, drew against Lyon at the Allianz Stadium, but after beating both Sevilla and Dinamo on the final match days, the old lady had completed the first part of the job, getting out of the group stage. Unlike Madrid, they topped their group, and that meant heading into the draws for the knockouts that year, they were bound to face a different type of competition. Real Madrid had another tough draw. They were up against an in-form Napoli team that topped their group and had to play the first leg at home. This was when away goals were still a thing, meaning if Napoli could score at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid could have a situation on their hands, and they did.
Fa attenzione ai movimenti di Marcelo che va alle spalle costantemente di Caicon quando il Real è in possesso palla.
1-2, Insigne cerca il pallonetto! Rete incredibile! Capolavoro al Bernabeu! Napoli in vantaggio!
Non era partito bene, ma qui ha fatto una rete straordinaria. Guardando il pallone è riuscito a vedere anche la posizione di Keylor Navas fuori dall'area piccola. Stava rientrando il portiere del Costa Rica.
8 minutes was all it took for Lorenzo Insigne to score against Madrid, and Los Blancos needed a response. But in true Madrid fashion, they didn't waste any time firing back. Benzema equalized 10 minutes later, and in the second half, the midfielders did the job. Toni Kroos and Casemiro scored to give Madrid a 3-1 lead after the first leg, but the job wasn't done. Because of Napoli's away goal, it meant that if they could beat Madrid by 2 clear goals in Naples without conceding, they'd knock the defending champions out. This, though, didn't happen. Real went to Naples and repeated the same scoreline from the first leg: 3-1, 6-2 on aggregate. This time the job really was done. They were into the quarterfinals again, switched the focus over to Juve, and despite finishing first, they still got another tricky draw: Porto. The first leg was at the Estadio do Dragão, and it was what was becoming a crazy sequence for Juventus in the Champions League that year. Their opponents got a red card and allowed Juve to play with a man's advantage. In the end, all that pressure finally broke Porto down with less than 20 minutes to go. Marco Piazza and Dani Alves scored the 2 goals and the advantage for Juve in the first leg. In the second leg in Turin, that crazy sequence continued. Porto got a red card 5 minutes before the end of the first half. Paulo Dybala scored less than 2 minutes later, and that goal was enough to confirm the win for Juve, 3-0 on aggregate, into the last 8. And it was here that things started to really heat up. The quarterfinal draws for both teams were blockbusters. Real Madrid, they were up against familiar opposition from Germany, Bayern Munich. But it wasn't just the same Bayern. What made this one even tougher was that Bayern's coach at the time was the man who secured Duodecima for the club. The same man who allowed Zidane to become his assistant and learn under him, Carlo Ancelotti. This wasn't just a reunion for Zidane and Ancelotti, it was the acid test to get one over the man who'd given him his big break. And to make matters worse, Zidane and his Real Madrid team had a problem. They were winning, but his superstar wasn't performing the way he'd have been expected to. Coming into the quarterfinals, Ronaldo had scored just 2 goals in the competition that year. For context, those 2 goals came in the opening match days of the competition, meaning he'd blanked for goals in 6 straight games. And in a match against Bayern, Zidane needed his star man to be in top form. The pressure was on, and that's what separates the ordinary from the great. Bayern dominated from kickoff at the Allianz Stadium, 25 minutes into the game, and they finally made that early possession count. Thiago Alcantara's corner, Arturo Vidal's goal, 1-0 Bayern. That's how the first half ended. Real Madrid struggled to create. In fact, they were fortunate to just be a goal down after Vidal's penalty miss in added time at the end of the first half. Ronaldo looked like he didn't exist in that period. He looked like he was about to take his unwanted scoring streak to 7 straight games. But in that moment, it's almost as if Ronaldo suddenly remembered who he was. The current Ballon d'Or holder, just 2 goals away from making history. It all just kind of clicked for him at that point, because just 2 minutes into the second half, Ronaldo was grabbing the headlines again. Boom. Just like that. He'd brought Madrid into the game. It had almost become a Real Madrid special quality. Just when they looked down and non-existent, they had players pop up with goals out of nothing to draw them back into the game. That's what Ronaldo did. But he wasn't done. He was chasing history, and he finally got it. His brace didn't just seal a 2-1 win at the Allianz Arena for Bayern. Cristiano Ronaldo at the time became the first player in Champions League history to hit 100 goals in the competition. Advantage Real Madrid, and more importantly, 2 away goals at one of the toughest grounds in Europe. But in that second leg, the tie was completely turned upside down. It was chaos at the Bernabeu. What's even crazier is that it didn't seem like happening to start with. It was goalless after the first half, but in the second, Robert Lewandowski bagged from the spot to give Bayern the lead. The next goal in the game was going to be very important in deciding this one. At least, that's what Ronaldo thought after scoring to make it 1-1, but only 2 minutes later, disaster. Sergio Ramos scored an own goal. Bayern 2, Real Madrid 1. In the same way Madrid had scored 2 away goals at the Allianz, that's how Bayern had scored 2 at the Bernabeu. This one went into extra time. The nerves and the stakes were high. The occasion made for the biggest players, and Cristiano Ronaldo seized the moment. He scored 2 more to complete a hat-trick. Marco Asensio scored to round it off. 4-2 for Real, 6-3 on aggregate. They were into the semi-finals of the competition after an epic quarter-final display. Shift the focus over to Turin, and it was another epic, only this one for different reasons. Juventus had a tough draw, very tough. They were up against Barcelona in a repeat of the 2015 final. Even with the new players on the team, Barca were the favourites heading into the first leg at the Allianz Stadium. But Max Allegri and his team had a plan up their sleeves. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making a statement to the rest of Europe that the old lady was back, and in that first leg, they put out a performance that sent shockwaves across Europe. Dybala with the brace. Juve beat Barca 3-0. The result was one thing, but the fact that Juve held that Barca attack to no goals at the Allianz, it was a huge defensive masterclass. But the job wasn't done. As insane as this might sound, even with the first leg defeat, many still expected Barca to find a way, and that's because of what they'd done in the round of 16. Barca lost the first leg 4-0 away to PSG in Paris, but in the second leg at the Nou Camp, they pulled off the mother of all comebacks to win 6-1 and become the first team in Champions League history to overturn a 4-goal deficit. See it now? To many people, if Barca could overturn 4 goals, getting back from 3 against Juve would be easier. But that's the thing that many people would only realize in the second leg. This Juventus team was built on a proper Italian principle with 3 rocks at the back: the Bonucci, Chiellini, and Barzali combo. Defend first, and they made Barca find out the hard way. 0-0 at the Nou Camp, 3-0 on aggregate. Juventus had kept a clean sheet against Barca in both legs to advance to the semis. Suddenly, the coast was even clearer for both teams. Everyone understood the mission. Real Madrid had the tougher draw, a familiar one. In the semis, they were up against city rivals Atlético Madrid, the same team they'd beaten in both the 2014 and 2016 finals. In fact, Real had either beaten or knocked Atleti out of the Champions League in 3 consecutive seasons leading up to that point, and this Atleti team wanted revenge. But first, they'd have to get past a Real Madrid team with Cristiano Ronaldo in insane form. It was never going to be easy, and in the end, Ronaldo was once again the difference. Another hat-trick. Back-to-back hat-tricks in 2 Champions League knockout games. Ronaldo was a man on a mission. His 3 goals left Atleti without any real chance of a comeback, and despite losing 2-1 at the Wanda Metropolitano, the job was done for Real. For the second year running, they were in the final of the Champions League. Juventus, meanwhile, continued their trend of facing the tricky opponents. They faced an AS Monaco team that was the surprise package of the competition leading up to that point. The idea was clear: continue the same defensive strategy that had helped the team win, and that's what they did. Higuain popped a brace away. They followed this up with a 2-1 win at the Allianz, 4-1 on aggregate. For the second time in 3 years, the old lady was in the final. And so guys, the stage was set. This one had every indicator to show that there'd be goals. At the same time, history was telling another story. Real Madrid was on the negative. No team had ever won the competition back-to-back. Juventus had been to 4 Champions League finals up to that point and lost all 4. Zidane against his former club. Cardiff, it was all set, and on the 3rd of June 2017, football got treated to a spectacle. Straight from the off, both teams came out flying. It was clear that this wasn't going to be cagey. At some point, the goal was bound to come, and on the 20th minute mark, in the biggest club competition game of the season, Cristiano Ronaldo made his mark. 1-0 Real Madrid. He'd done in 20 minutes what the MSN had failed to do in over 180. Get a goal past that Juve backline. But you see guys, Juve weren't just good defensively, they had lethal players in attack who could create chances out of nothing. Players like Paulo Dybala, Gonzalo Higuain, or the guy who eventually got Juve level, Mario Mandžukić. Stunning overhead kick from an almost impossible angle, 1-1. 30 minutes gone and both teams had already bagged goals. It somehow finished level by half-time, but it was clear that there were more goals in this one. Juve continued to threaten, but minutes into the second half, and Real Madrid started to ooze quality, particularly in midfield. The trio of Kroos, Modric, and Casemiro ran the show, and with that low block Juve was using in defense, Casemiro decided to try his luck from way out. And boom! Took a deflection, but still went in. 2-1. That goal forced Juve to come out. They needed to respond, else they'd be facing the same situation they did in 2015. But Real Madrid chose that moment to send a lethal reminder of how effective they are on the big stage. Before the old lady could make sense of Casemiro's goal, they added a third. Ronaldo again. His brace. 12 goals in the competition. Insane for a guy who only had 2 heading into the quarterfinals. Real Madrid had hit another gear and Juve was struggling. It was always going to be hard against this Madrid team. Unfortunately, no matter what they tried, they didn't seem to have any real answers. Madrid continued to attack and maintain the rhythm. It got worse for Juve after Juan Cuadrado's controversial second yellow card for a foul on Ramos. He got sent off. Marco Asensio came on to add a fourth, and minutes later, it was done. Real Madrid had made history. The first team since the Champions League was rebranded to win the competition back-to-back. As for Juventus, they were making history too, just on the negative side. They became the first team to lose 5 Champions League finals, the most in the competition. Real Madrid showed in that moment what it means to be the true kings of Europe, always finding a way. Having superstars who can turn up when the stakes are highest. La Duodecima was done. As crazy as this Champions League campaign was though, it still doesn't match up to that epic showdown between Barcelona and Man United in 2009. The clash of two ideologies, the new school versus the old guard. Click the next video to find out why the 2009 Champions League final will never be forgotten.